To put this out real quick, this little download is inspired by the conversation yesterday initiated by Hunter in regards to sitting down, looking at a bunch of work that's been done previously, perhaps not immediately, seeing the connections that you made in that prior session, the level of frustration that might arise. I just wanted to see if I could address that with some kind of concrete guidance and some frameworks that you guys can consider as you go about translating your vision, your dream, into something that people can perceive as valuable. So I've got a bit of a Venn diagram. I think it's really helpful to just illustrate what we're trying to achieve here. We're operating in a couple of different planes. So in the realm of your vision, this is your connection to purpose, inspiration grabbing, documenting and following through, allowing yourselves to be authentically influenced and inspired by what's already working for others. We're also operating in the realm of attitudes. So this pertains to your targets, what you want your specific response to frustration to be, getting really clear about that. What you want your specific startle response to be, getting really clear about that. Understanding also how you want to approach your fear around data collection, which is something that is vital for you to engage in, whether that's through outreach, putting offers out there, creating content and seeing who picks it up and why they pick it up. That ability to be willing to engage in data collection is crucial. There's also a willingness that we need to cultivate to use resources effectively. So not waiting for the perfect time to use a resource, but getting in there and using it when it's applicable. We're also grounding into your tasks. So some of the tasks, this is not an exhaustive list, but your offer, your strategy session, your community building, ultimately automations, outreach, the systems that support you, also your fundamentals. We're kind of, if you could imagine the resonance revolution being a belt around all of these different areas that slowly tightens around you, hopefully in a joyful way, to push you towards that ultimate potency and coherence over time. So what does this have to do with Hunter's question in regards to looking at a bunch of work, not immediately seeing the connections that he might have made prior? So when you're operating in the realm of vision, we have to get really clear about the assumptions that underpin this. Some of those assumptions can be that you decided at some point to create something based on a vision, a sense you have, a dream, and that this is something that does not currently exist. When we're trafficking, I don't know if I love that word, but I kind of love the word, so I'm using it. When we're trafficking in visions and dreams, it's by nature ethereal and complex. So knowing that, we can't become startled by that reality that goes hand in hand with your desire to create something based on a vision. But rather, when we come into contact with that complexity, that ethereal nature, we want to use that as opportunities to ground, to systematize, and to ultimately sink into the joy around it. This grounding needs to occur at the level of you as a person, and also around how you position your offer in a way that acknowledges the actual reasons people buy. We've talked about that a lot, so I won't go too much into it, but this is referencing the currencies of value, things like legacy, energy, relationships, attention, making more money, wasting less time, all of these things. We want to continually have a practice to ground our offer in. Tactically speaking, what can you do when we're looking across a vision. We're attempting to ground that vision in our attitudes and our tasks so that we can develop that potency and coherence. On a moment-to-moment basis, some of the things that we can do and be aware of. Tuning into our body before and during work will help you reduce the complexity and the overwhelm that can come from looking at something that has an ethereal nature to it, which again is implied in the work that you're doing. So we don't want to allow ourselves to become frustrated by that when it actually is just something that goes hand in hand with the work that we're trying to do. We also want to be aware of our startle reflex when we see something that's complex and confusing. When you come across a disorganized list of your ideas, your thoughts, how do you truly want to approach that? What would be your ideal response to that? Taking 10 seconds to get really clear about that so that you know what to do when it happens, because it definitely will. And again, is sort of part of the nature of the work we're doing. It's also, I think, important to be aware, because this has come up a little bit in different conversations. Your significant other and or people who might be closely observing you are going to struggle to wrap their minds around what you're doing. So, given that it's hard for you to wrap your mind around what you're doing at times, it seems pretty normal that they would have a hard time with it. So the answer to this really is to have a commitment to being consistent in grounding and translating yourself and your offer into something people can perceive as valuable while retaining and enhancing the potency by grounding again into your tasks, into your attitudes. They work together to keep your vision from floating away. We want to wrap around you and tighten all these things over time, not in a way that is constrictive, but in a way that, again, reinforces your potency and your coherence. But going back to the specific target with regards to people who might be observing us, the tactic is knowing that, hoping that they will just get it, that it will somehow transmute from you to them, is asking something that's impossible. It's really important as a general practice to avoid allowing ourselves to become frustrated by impossible situations so that we can see all of the myriad of things that are truly possible, and so that we can use our contact with that impossible reality of trying to transmute what's going on in your mind and what you're trying to create to them, using those moments of friction as fuel and prompts and triggers and cues to ground ourselves and take concrete action. This is how you can use those, the reality that other people may not be able to perceive exactly what you're doing and why, and use them to create a feedback loop that reinforces and drives you into grounded, concrete action. This is actually really important to master, and I wouldn't view it as adjacent to the work that you're doing on your program, but rather it's integral, because it will teach you how to lead authentically while being able to simultaneously acknowledge the reality of the world and how it works in all of its complexity in a joyful way versus, darn it, I really wish it wasn't like this way, which can feel better in the moment, but ultimately doesn't really tell you what to do. We want to be leading authentically in close contact with the realities that we're being presented with. In the case of your significant other looking at you like you might have four heads, this is a prompt for you to get grounded. This is a joyful opportunity to connect to reality, which they're attempting to kind of communicate with you around. That's not to say that you abandon your ambition, your vision, or your dream, or what you believe needs to happen, but that you have the wisdom to ground all of that into the realities that are presenting themselves. If we don't do this, we ultimately are running around with a lot of tension, and they will also be running around with a lot of tension. We want to make sure that we're turning these points of tension into a productive tension versus a dreadful tension, both for the sake of what you're trying to achieve and also to acknowledge the joyful constraints that we started with here. I believe that everybody who is in this program has a very deep desire to approach the creation of their program in a way that acknowledges and embraces their loved ones. I imagine that came up on some level in each of your joyful constraints. So we want to make sure that we're constructing habits around resolving tension that can emerge as we try to thread those joyful constraints, as we try to implement our joyful constraints, while also moving ambitiously with a level of, I like the word ruthless. It sounds a little harder than I mean it, but we want to be integrating the joyful constraints as we are simultaneously moving ruthlessly towards what we believe needs to happen with the program. So I hope that's helpful. If you guys have thoughts, questions, reflections, just give me a shout and we'll ping pong from there. Hope you guys are having an awesome day.